Hey guys, today we're going to be checking out a bike I'm really excited about. It's called the Moustache Friday FS5. And Moustache is a French brand, and we're fortunate to be working with them. We started working with them years ago, and now they've been bringing much more of their line, and they have a lot of exciting updates for 2020. We did a walkthrough with them at Eurobike, which you can check out the link for that video below. But this is specifically the Friday. This is the only Friday full suspension bike that they're bringing to the US for this year. And the Friday for them is kind of a everyday city bike. Now they have different bike names for different days of the week. For example, they have Monday, they have the Samedi, which is like Saturday. This is the Friday. It's FS, meaning full suspension, and 5, meaning that's where it falls in the line of specs. They do have different versions, but this one for the US is actually their top spec. So we're excited to have that, and it's got a lot of nice, really nice features to it. So one of the great details for this year is they've totally updated the frame design. They have the integrated battery with the new Bosch Generation 4 motor system. Previously, they used the standard power pack and sunk it into the frame. Now they're using the power tube. And this particular bike comes with the 500 watt hour, but it is compatible with the 625 as well as the 400 watt hour power tube. It comes with the new Generation 4 CX motor. It's full suspension, and it's fully set up as a commuter bike, so fenders, rack, lights, and that sort of thing. So we're going to go into more of the details, but I wanted to just talk about the bike overall first, and then we'll get into some of the finer details on the bike. So overall, this bike is really good for a variety of different riders. I say some people in particular might find this bike very suiting for them is if you live in a really hilly environment. It has that CX motor, so you get quite a bit of torque going up hills. Also, if maybe you live in a rougher area, or if you have like back problems like myself, you might find that full suspension is really going to help you. And beyond the comfort factor, full suspension is really going to improve your traction, so you'll feel overall have a much safer ride as well. But the design of the bike is really great. They got some really great touch points on it, ergonomic grips, Brooks saddle, etc. And so I think somebody that wants something that looks really nice, performs great, it's going to be a great fit for you. So let's go into some of the details, and we'll talk more about the bike that way. So for the tires on this bike, we have the Schwalbe Supermoto X. These tires, as you might have seen in many of our other reviews, are very popular, and they're great because they're nice and wide, they have good tread on them, and really great puncture protection, so they can handle most of what the city will throw at you, but even perform well if you have some light off-road riding as well. So I'm a huge fan of these tires, and if anybody's asking for my favorite, these are definitely them. So well spec there. But this is a 27.5, this is a 2.4 inch wide. So if you wanted to put more of an off-road tire on here, you can easily do so. And I think some people might consider that. So say you want to get this bike, but you want to ride a little bit more off-road, just doing that will be a great update to this setup. This is set up with the Suntour Mobi 25 fork. Now this is a coil spring fork, but it's really quite a nice coil spring fork. A lot of times you'll see coil spring forks that are kind of lower spec, but this one actually, it's really beefy. It's made specifically for e-bikes, and it's got a very high level of adjustability. The preload is really easy to work with. You have a rebound adjust as well as a lockout. It's set up with a through axle up front, and it's 100 millimeters of suspension travel. So this fork, I'd say, works really well for this bike. I found the performance to be really nice, and I didn't actually notice that it was a coil spring fork right away, but it is, and I think it performs just as well as most air spring forks. So I'm happy with that, and you have a bit lower maintenance with the coil spring in comparison to the air fork. Now, some other things characteristic of all Moustache bikes that are made for more urban riding is their double wall aluminum fenders. Really solid setup, and they look great and perform really nicely as well. They don't really move at all. You don't feel them bouncing around or anything like that. So it's nice, and it's something that's characteristic of all Moustache bikes, and I appreciate that they put that attention to detail into their bikes. It really separates them from many other brands out there. For the drivetrain on the Friday FS5, we have the Shimano SLX 11-speed derailleur, and it's set up with a 11 to 40 tooth cassette. Pretty good range, and I'd say it's plenty for most urban environments. Now, this has also featured on it is the Shadow Plus system, where you can actually make the derailleur a little bit stiffer. So this is the default position, and if I firm that up, I have switched the switch here, it makes it much stiffer. So it's really great if you're riding in rougher terrain. It might make it shift a little bit harder, but it's great if you're riding, as I said, in rougher terrain and you don't want the chain to slap out around as much. So you can set up with the Shimano 11-speed chain, and then they have this really nice chain guard. But let's check out the motor and we can see a little bit more of that. So this year they've updated to the Bosch Generation 4 CX motor. Quite a bit of torque, 75 Newton meters, and really performs great climbing hills. And I also found, which is quite nice, this bike has a 20-mile-an-hour top speed, but I found myself out riding over here, riding pretty comfortably at 23, 24 miles an hour. There's little to no drag in that motor, so I find I can ride beyond that 20 miles an hour quite easily, and that extra torque off the line is really nice on the CX motor. So 42 chainring up front, and as I said, they have this really nice chain guard that they've integrated here. This is something that's pretty difficult to do on a full suspension bike, but I really appreciate that attention to detail, because you think about it, this bike could be used for somebody that's commuting to work and they might have nicer pants on and they don't want them to get dirty, and having that chain guard is going to protect you really nicely. Now, this motor is totally updated for this year. It's the Generation 4, which has a lot of nice features. So now they're using a magnesium casing on it, so they've lightened it up quite a bit. They've removed the reduction gear, so as I said before, really easy to pedal without power. They still have the 75 Newton meters of torque, same as last year, but the actual performance and the assistance percentage is actually a bit higher. So previously it was 275%, now we're up to 340% at the top level of assistance. That's pretty significant. Now this system, as all Bosch systems, use a technology called pedal assist, and basically how that works is they assist you as you pedal. It just really amplifies what you put into it. So they use 3 different sensors. Inside the motor, there's a sensor that senses how fast you're pedaling. Then you also have a sensor that senses how hard you're pedaling. And then they have a sensor on the rear wheel, which senses how fast the bike is going overall. I should note that generally speaking, you'll see that sensor right here on the rear chainstay, but actually this year, they've updated it to mount it on the disc brake. So it provides a more precise measurement, and it's less likely to get hit or something like that, or pushed out of the way. So I appreciate that nice update there. With all this information, the system takes 1,000 senses per second, and it's able to deliver really precise power, and it produces a seamless experience. So you really kind of just feel like the bike is working with you. You feel stronger than you are, as opposed to the bike pushing you, which is a nice feeling, but I think that it feels a lot more controlled when the bike is just working with you seamlessly. And that's one of the reasons why I'm a really big fan of the Bosch system. For the battery on the Friday FS5, we have the 500 watt hour power tube battery. As I said, it's also compatible with the 625 as well as the 400 watt hour. And I'll show you in just a moment how they do that. And to make that cross compatibility, they use an adapter. So the overall length is for the 625 watt hour, but they spec this one with the 500 watt hour. Keep the weight and the price down a little bit, but if you really wanted to, you could potentially use the 625 watt hour. You can charge the battery on the bike or off the bike. If you wanted to charge the battery on the bike, you just use this port down here, and it's a really nice integration, I think. You know, the way that they set this up, they have their own little rubber cover here, and it's set up quite nicely there. So let's just take the battery off for a second and we could show what that looks like. I think they've done one of the nicer integrations overall. To remove the cover, we just have this little tab we pull down on. So just pull that down, and as you see, it just kind of pushes in like that. And then once the cover is removed, we can remove the battery. the battery is locked in with a key, so we'll just insert the key here, turn the key, and you want to just put your hand on under here. Now you'll notice that the battery can actually fall out without releasing this tab, but I always like to take that extra precaution, put my hand under here, and then we're just going to push this little tab. That's what's going to release the battery. So as I said, this has this special adapter on here because the 625 watt-hour battery is a bit longer than the 500 watt-hour battery, but they use the same frame for their different bikes. So if you wanted to, you can use the same adapter on a 400 watt-hour battery, or you could insert a 625 watt-hour battery. Now, as a shop, I'm not really sure exactly how we'll handle that internally. Say if somebody wanted to buy this bike with a 625 watt-hour, I think we could figure something out. So, you know, you can talk to us or talk to the shop that you might be working with, but you know, of course, we prefer you work with us, but, you know, you understand. But to charge the battery off the bike, you're going to go through here, and you'll see this little button here. This will just tell you the state of charge. And you'll also use this button if maybe there's something going on with the battery. You need to reset it. You can hold it down for a couple of seconds to do that. To insert the battery, you're just going to put the bottom in first. You want to make sure you get it all the way in there. And then, and make sure this is straight because it's easy to kind of angle that. And you'll see I'm actually trying to push this in. It won't go in, and you might be wondering, what do I got to do? Actually, got to turn the key, and that will release the latch here and allow you to insert it. You can pull the key out, and then we're just going to put the cover back in place. So the bottom portion in first, pull that little notch, and you're right in there. So really nice design. For the rear shock, we have their specific shock, and it's 100 millimeters of travel. Now, it has a lockout, it's an air shock, and it has the rebound adjust. One thing that's interesting about Moustache, since the beginning, they've been really developing their own shocks, and they've always found this to be quite critical because, especially on an electric bike, you could find yourself climbing a lot more and that sort of thing. So they really wanted to optimize the suspension for traction, and they do a great job at that. So it doesn't really bob as much, and their design is really quite nice. One thing I should just mention, a lot of times people ask me this, is what's this ring about? And this is what you use to set what's called the suspension sag. So what you want to do is put this all the way up here, and then when you sit on the bike in your natural riding position, you should see it go down about 25% or so. And that way you're in the active travel of the suspension. So when you're riding the bike, you're going to actually utilize the suspension. Some other little stuff you'll see over here. You see this little cover. This is actually covering up the cables which run through here. And the bike is also dropper post compatible. So if you did want to insert a dropper post on here, you can do so. And that's a really nice way to go. For the display on this bike, we have the Bosch Intuvia. So pretty basic display. There's some different ones out there, but I think it works quite well, and a lot of people appreciate the Intuvia because it's pretty large. To turn it on, you just hit the power button here, and you'll have the battery power, miles per hour. Here it's set right now on the max speed, but we can cycle through some of the different information here just by hitting this I button. Average speed, trip time, range. The range is going to change depending on what assistance level you choose. So by default, it's going to be in off mode. That might be different depending on your locale, but in the US, that's how our system works. So you hit the plus button, you go up to the first level of assistance, showing me 53 miles in eco mode. I think I could probably get a bit more out of it, but right now I've only ridden it less than a mile here, so I don't think that you're going to find that that it's going to be completely accurate to what you would normally see. But you go up to the different assistance levels, you can see how that range is going to change. At the top level of assistance, you're showing 26 miles, but really I'd say most people would see somewhere between 25 and 30 miles out of the top level of assistance, and somewhere between, I guess, 50 and 70 or so miles on the lower levels of assistance. So something to consider there. Yeah, you see just about a mile on here. But when we rode over here, I was really kind of opened up the top speed, and I found it performed really well. So it's probably showing the range at a bit lower rate because I was really pushing that motor pretty hard, even in that brief period that I rode it. Some other details about the display: you can turn it on and off. You have the light button here. If you just tap that, it'll turn the lights on. You have a headlight front and rear. This has the Blue Line 3.0e, and that's a AXA headlight, and then you have a nice tail light integrated into the fender, which is quite nice. Some other things about the display, you have the ability to connect a phone or something like that. It doesn't put out that much power, so if you wanted to charge like an iPhone or something like that, it generally doesn't have enough power. For that, I would say you might want to consider swapping to a different display. And there are some different options. You can go with a smartphone hub, which will use your actual phone as the display, and that's a nice way to go, especially if you wanted to charge your phone on board. But there's other ways to do that as well. Some other details while we're up here I'd like to just talk about. Just checking out the overall handlebars on the bike. You have these really nice ergonomic bars. You have a nice sweep back to them. You have a slight rise to them and a nice sweep back, and these ergonomic grips. So the grips have this nice shape to them, and it gives you some extra support for your hands, so you don't have this just single line cutting across your hands. It really spreads the pressure out, and it helps to, keep your circulation going. The stem on this bike is really unique. They call it the Quick Park system, and basically you just push this up here, and you could open this, and with that you're able to actually turn the handlebars all the way to the side. And that makes it really nice if you have to store the bike in a hallway or some other area where you might not have as much space. And then you just put it right back in place and then push this lever down, and the stem is right back where it's supposed to be and quite solid. So that's a really nice setup for if you're in an urban environment, maybe you don't have as much space. Even, maybe you're carrying it upstairs. The bike is not that heavy. It's only 52 pounds. So with that, you take the battery off, you're going even lighter, and you move the stem to the side. I could find myself, when I used to live in Brooklyn, I had a pretty narrow staircase. I could find myself carrying this thing up and down the stairs, even with some of my limited mobility. For the shifter on here, we have the Shimano SLX 11-speed, and to shift down, you can actually shift 3 gears at a time. Shifting up, you can shift them individually. But it's what's called a rapid fire shifter. You can shift very quickly. Now generally you're not going to be shifting the gears when you're not pedaling. That would produce a kind of undesired result, but you'll generally want to shift the gears while you're pedaling, unless you have internally geared hub, which you can shift the gears while you're at a standstill. For the brakes on here, we have Shimano hydraulic brakes, and it's a 2-finger lever, really nice setup. And let's check out the rotors. For the calipers, we have a 2-piston caliper with the Shimano center lock rotors, and it's a 180 front and rear, plenty of stopping power, and I find they perform really nicely. For the rear rack, Moustache decided to use something a bit custom here, and they use these little nubs here, and these are really set up for the Ortlieb QL3 system, so it allows you to click a bag on and off the rack really easily, and it has a flat back to it, where most panniers have these larger clips here. Now you can remove these and use more of a standard pannier if they have the clips to fit and they're adjustable inside of this. So a standard Ortlieb QL 2.1 system will work on here, but it's really optimized for the QL 3.1. And if you're just buying a bag, I'd recommend getting one with that system because it works really well on this sort of setup, and it's a really clean setup at that. For the saddle on this bike, it has the Brooks Cambium C17. The C17 is the widest of their cambium, and the cambium is kind of a rubberized canvas, so it's flexible. And you might look at this saddle and say, that thing's going to be really uncomfortable. It's really not bad, and actually one of the things that most people don't think about is the saddle works in a lot of ways kind of similar to like a hammock. So actually you're sitting more in this portion of the saddle, and it's going to flex here. Now it's easy enough if you wanted to swap to a different saddle, maybe with more padding and that sort of thing. But if you're a more experienced cyclist, being used to maybe more like road bike style saddle, something like this will work quite well, and it doesn't take too long for it to break in. I mean, they say that it's broken in from the start, but I find that I don't know if it's me breaking into the saddle or the saddle breaking into me, but basically there's something going on there. So personally, you know, I don't know whether or not I'd stick with this or not. It's really beautiful, and the nice thing about it is it's weatherproof as well. So something to consider, and it's kind of a personal preference. There's all different options when it comes to saddles, so you know, it's something to consider. We did make a great video about comfort as well, so you might want to check that out if you're thinking about going with something in a different direction there. And this bike's available in 4 different frame sizes: small, medium, large, and extra large. This particular frame size is large. At 5'9", I probably would generally go for a medium size, although certainly the large size can fit me. And one of the nice things about the bikes overall is it has pretty low standover height because of this nice dip to the frame, and I really appreciate that, so makes it work quite well. And then the small size is a 39 centimeters, so those goes down pretty small. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. I'm really excited about this bike and what Moustache is bringing to the table overall. I think that this is a great combination, as I said, for, you know, city riders or someone that really just want a bike that can do anything, go anywhere. If you have any questions about this bike or e-bikes in general, always feel free to reach out to us or just write some questions in the comments. We're always happy to help, and I look forward to seeing you in a future video. Well, see you soon.